Hi, my name's Tate. I will be reacting to Richard Lee's article, Eating Christmas in the Kalahari. So this article is it's a true story of Richard Lee, who was an anthropologist working among the Kungsan people in the Kalahari Desert. So for Christmas, he wanted to give them a special gift. So Lee thought it would be best for a large ox to be gifted to them for them to eat so that they could appreciate him and that they would have a lot to eat on Christmas. And, he thought it was generous and he expected them to be very grateful. But what he got in return was a lot of people actually making fun of him. They started making fun of his ox, telling him it was thin, it was not big enough, or that it was big, but there wasn't a lot of meat on it for them to actually eat. And Lee was pretty discouraged about this, he tells us, and it wasn't until later that he realized what the Kung San people were actually trying to do, and that was trying to humble him. They were trying to humble Lee because that is what they do in their culture. You see, in their culture, it is a big thing for them to try to humble people and to try to keep people almost in their place, and so that they don't get to the point of boasting and thinking too much of their own abilities. But for Lee, he was used to his Western culture, which was the more I can give, the more people will appreciate me. And he did give them a great gift, and I'm sure they greatly appreciated it. But the way they reacted was because of how their culture is. They want to react by making sure that you don't get too full of yourself. And this really shows how worldview shapes interpretation in those ways that I just described. So it's kind of crazy because the same act of giving a gift carried two complete different meanings when you look at the contrast of the two cultures, the Western culture and the culture they had in the Kalahari Desert. And one ethnocentric bias in the story was Lee just assuming that his way of gift giving, showing generosity and expecting gratitude and lots of thanks, was normal. His worldview led him to feel very insulted when they mocked him, because that's not something that people do in the Western world. When they receive a gift, they usually thank the person who is giving the gift very much, verbally, just saying thank you, and greatly showing their appreciation. So Lee was not used to this reaction. So that was one ethnocentric bias in the story. And in reality, they weren't fully just making fun of him and ragging on him, but they were trying to teach him humility, because that's what is important to them in their culture. And the story really challenges the idea that one's own cultural values are best. You see, because every person is raised to believe that how they were raised up is the right way, and the right way to live, the right way to do things. So it is very hard for someone to get out of that type of mindset of just believing whatever they were accustomed to believe growing up. Because when you're young and you're growing up, you're very influenced by your culture and things you're taught and the way that things are happening around you, because you're in such a vulnerable state where so much is just affecting you. So I've had some personal experiences with this. Similarly, about a year and a half ago, I did a program called YWAM, which stands for Youth with a Mission. And in YWAM, it's normal for you to go through about 3 months of biblical schooling, and then we take a 2-month mission trip to some other country. So I did my discipleship training school in Colorado. So I was in Colorado. I'm from Kentucky. So even in Colorado, the culture is a little different compared to Kentucky, even though we're in the same country. But People are a lot more loose out there. I'd say people are a little bit more friendly in Kentucky personally. So there was even some small differences there. But we ended up going to Japan on our mission trip. And Japan was a complete 180 from everything the Western civilization teaches people about what's right and what should happen in certain situations when it comes to just thanking others or expressing gratitude or how to behave yourself in public. And we studied a lot about Japan before we went because we knew it would be important to understand their cultural differences. One of the biggest things that they told us before going to Japan was that when you are in public, let's say public transportation like a bus or a train, it's very inappropriate in Japan to be loud or be talking a lot with whoever you're with. And it's just looked down upon because people are going about their day. Everyone's very private and they don't want to be bothered and they don't want to hear all this noise, and everyone's very aware of other people and considerate, I'd say. But in the US, everyone is always talking and being not loud, but it's pretty normal for people to be expressive and talk a lot in public settings, and most people don't mind that. But in Japan, even after we had learned this, it was so hard for us to get out of our way of doing that we would just forget, and we would be loud on the trains and buses, and we'd get looks from people that were like, "What are you doing?" So that was definitely an adjustment because we were there for 2 months, and eventually we would remember to do that, and we would remember to respect their boundaries. And that was just another thing where we had to get over the fact of thinking, oh, they shouldn't worry about us being loud. I mean, we're just talking. It's not hurting them at all. But no, we had to realize that their culture is different, and in their culture, they see that as inappropriate. So we needed to respect that. And our way of thinking isn't any better than their way just because we were raised that way. So the biggest lesson I would say I took overall from this article is just that worldview and perception really shape and interpret almost everything in intercultural communication. Because what feels normal or respectful to you might feel strange or even offensive to someone else, even a couple miles down the road, because we all grow up in different cultures and live in different settings, and it all shapes how we think and what we find appropriate or inappropriate or funny or not funny. So it's important that we all understand that we have these differences and respect each other nonetheless. So staying humble and open-minded is the real key to understanding. And that's all I got.